I'm a little nervous because people, so be patient with me. All right, this is Nobody Puts Database in the Corner, applying DevOps principles to our database. And since I didn't realize we all are supposed to be doing a show of hands, that's our thing now, I'm gonna go ahead and say show of hands. Who hasn't seen Dirty Dancing? Just own up to it now. You have one assignment and one assignment only from this conference. You may leave now and go execute it. All right, and now, because I like to be a little serious, I gotta make this bigger. Sorry, I'm not an Apple person, and I'm using an Apple. Plus is for bigger, right? Okay, this is cray. This is insane. All right, I'm good. I got it. Computers are hard. I hope they don't catch on. First of all, really quickly, but incredibly importantly, I know that DevOps Days has taken a stand as well, and I hope other people have taken a stand, and the company I work for, Liquibase, has taken a stand. It's a very easy stand to take. I'm going to try not to cry. I have Ukrainian colleagues. I'm sure many of us have Ukrainian colleagues. Please do what you can. So much of our software and our, let's face it, our existence relies on engineering and the minds and hearts and talents of people in Ukraine. So please do what you can. Thank you. Thank you. And now segue to humor. Yeah, here's the obligatory comic that you have to put in. I love this one. So you've got the little, first of all, I'm a product owner, so I'm about to bust on product owners, and that's allowed because I am a product owner. If you ever become an engineer who works with me, you may not bust on me as the product owner. Clear? Good, thank you. All right, so here we got a little engineer saying we won't be able to deliver our product in time because of some issues with MySQL. Never heard that before, right? And then the product owner, says, what? Then use somebody else's SQL because I want the product in time. Bringing that up because of we're here about talking about DevOps, we're talking about the wall, we're talking about speeding things up, we're talking about bottlenecks, and where's one of the greatest bottlenecks in all of our wonderful fabulousness is in the DevOps community culture world practice. It's at the database level. So, who am I and why do I get to be here to talk about this? First of all, I represent a company I started in October. I didn't start the company. God, that sounded terrible. Sorry, they're recording this. My bosses are like, she didn't start the company. I started working at the company. Remember, people. I'm okay. Liquibase is a database change automation tool that helps teams release software faster and safer by bringing the database into existing CI/CD automation, which is a nice description. Obviously doesn't tell you technically all of the ins and outs, which I also will not be doing a lot of up here, but I'll be around today and tomorrow. So I'm not, like Maddie, I'm not gonna talk a lot about the product. I'm gonna talk more about the principles, the ideas, the questions. Only have 25 minutes, so spoiler alert, we're not gonna solve database DevOps in the next 20 minutes. Just spoiler alert. Who am I? I'm Karen Taggart. I'm product owner of Community. I work on the open source side very proudly at Liquibase. That's me. Those are my dogs. They are why I exist. Please reach out, contact me. Would love to chat. I do live in this area, so if you're around. And I like coffee. The plan, what we're gonna do today, I'm gonna step back and talk a little bit about the promise of DevOps, basing it off of a lot from the DevOps Handbook. If you all haven't read it, it's fantastic. There's a new edition out. It's not necessarily the page turner to read at night, although for me, I do, but it has a lot of really great ways to look at things and think about things and a lot of great case studies. So we're gonna take the framework from there called the 3 ways and see how those are currently being applied to sort of standard-ish DevOps. Then we're going to say, okay, let's pause, let's put that over here, and we're going to say, well, what's different about the database? Because there are some things that are different. We are a different breed where there's some stuff that's hard. I mean, not that DevOps isn't hard, that sounded terrible, sorry. I tend to say things and they come out the way I don't want them to, so just take all of that with a grain of salt, please. So after we talk about that, we'll say, okay, now that we have the 3 ways and we have what's different about the database, is there anything we can mush together? Are there any of these principles that we can apply and maybe take this forward and help break down some of the bottlenecks that are happening regarding our database changes and our database deployment as it goes along with our application and infrastructure development? So hopefully we'll get some time for some Q&A. I'm also known to babble a little bit, so if we don't have time for Q&A, again, I'll be around. And without further ado, let's talk about the promise of DevOps. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about like what is DevOps? Is it a people? Is it a practice? Is it a set of tools? We joke, where can I buy the DevOps? I want to buy the DevOps. No, you can't. So I like this definition because it's a promise. It's sort of the hope, the inspiration of it. organizations will be able to create a safe system of work where small teams are able to quickly and independently develop, test, and deploy code and value quickly, safely, securely, and reliably to customers. Also, able to maximize developer productivity, enable organizational learning, create high employee satisfaction, and win the marketplace. So totally doable, right? I mean, this is like simple. We all got this. I like this though. I like to start when I like to start really like high level, where am I going, and then kind of break it down. So the next step, this is the promise. Really nice framework that the DevOps Handbook puts in place. And I like this one because, again, the definitions of DevOps are always controversial. You know, is it automation? Is it this? Is it monitoring? Is it yada, yada? And I've found that this framework is actually generic enough that we can all kind of apply it to whatever it is we're doing and whatever stage, or I hate maturity models, so I don't want to call level of maturity, but wherever we're at in our situation. At the same time, it is specific enough that it's actionable, because the last thing I like is a lot of fluffy words. Although you may not know that at the end of my presentation, but I like action. I like things where I walk out and I'm like, what can I actually do? And I think this framework is a really nice medium between that. It's also really nice because you can use it to talk about what you do with people who don't do what you do. And I don't know about you all, but that's always a challenge. Maybe not at Christmas. Maybe don't take this home for the holidays, but it's in terms of a business context, it's good. And we could easily do a whole entire class on all of these principles, or even any one of them. This is just going to be dipping our toes in. One of the things I love about going to conferences is it gets me out of the weeds a little bit. You know, I'm obsessed with a certain set of products and things that are happening, and how do I scale my database? I'm like down in here. And now I'm like, okay, let's step back and let's look at why are we here? What are we actually doing? So, did I skip one? I sure did. Look at that. See, again, people. So there's 3 ways. The first way, increase flow by making work visible, reducing batch sizes, building quality in, preventing defects from being passed downstream. All right, gotcha. All right, the goal, I like to keep this in mind, decrease lead time, increase reliability and quality. So it's not going faster and it's not going better, it's going faster and better at the same time. So this is all about moving from left to right. I guess if I'm mirroring you all, left to right, you know what I'm doing. Let's go left to right. All right, easy, fast flow work from left to right. So hold that in the back of your head. The second one, pretty easy. Let's go the other direction. What does that look like? This is the principle of feedback. The second way, to create fast, frequent, high-quality information flow at all stages of the value stream. Use feedback to prevent, detect, and remediate problems while they are small, easy, and cheap. All right, I got that. The goal here is to create an ever-safe and more resilient system of work. Enable fast and constant feedback from left to right. So it's a lot of kind of what Maddie was talking about earlier, where he was saying it wasn't necessarily the developer's responsibility to do all of the things. It was the idea of bringing all of these questions about security, about infrastructure, about, gosh forbid, the changes to the database as far left as you can before they become catastrophic. So the third way, also kind of a common theme we're already hearing a lot about, is more about the people, because can't do any of this without people. The principles of continual learning and experimentation. All right, trick question. Raise your hand if you're a database or if you're a DevOps expert. This is my favorite crowd ever. Thank you. No such thing. It's a big pet peeve of mine. I mean, what's changed in the past 5 minutes that I've been up here? 8 minutes and 32 seconds. Sorry, I lied. What has changed in technology? Oh my God, like everything. Everything we're talking about is wrong now. Like there's no way. So let's all humble ourselves. We're all learning in this together. And even if you know something over here, the 10, 100, 1,000 people, processes, and systems over here don't. So are you being as effective as you can be? No judgment, maybe. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to enable constant creation of individual knowledge and to turn this into into team and org knowledge. So the idea is to create high trust culture where we are all continual learners. This is hard, and I'm not going to be able to solve this either today, but I want to just always kind of call this one out. Turn local learnings into global improvements. So don't just learn it, don't just prevent it, teach it, scale the teaching, scale the learning. All right, cool. So I got the 3 ways. What do these kind of look like now? So again, we've already understand what DevOps is. All right, now we're going to say current, very basic, stepping back. Where are the 3 ways, sort of the fundamentals that are in play right now? All right, this is a pretty common workflow diagram. I understand many of the ones we work with are more complex. There's parallel pipelines and multiple feedback loops, but in general, this is a pretty nice basic one that I'm using. So let's look at the first one, flow. We said the goal was to decrease lead time and to increase reliability and quality, making work visible, reducing batch sizes, building quality in, preventing defects from being passed downstream. Enable fast flow, working from left to right. All right, big players in this game. And this one is not a trick question. How many of you all use a version control system? Oh, and the hands go up. Thank you. I mean, 15 years ago, that wouldn't have been quite the wonderful, embracing kumbaya moment that we just had. And you all are probably taking that for granted a little bit. So just thank all the version control creators out there, because that is obviously very key. How many of you all have some automated testing in place, whether that's testing your application code or your infrastructure? Excellent, fantastic. Also, another kumbaya moment that we get to celebrate, pause, and say we've done something great for the first way. All right, the second, that's just pick two. I'm not doing all of them, obviously, just two. All right, so the second, feedback. Reminder, our goal is to create an ever safer and more resilient system of work from right to left. So some feedback loops. Example, we talked about unit testing, integration testing. A developer gets notified, I go submit something, great, it goes through a scan, it's all good, la la la. My unit testing, all right, I just passed. It goes into automated integration testing, it breaks something else. I get notified. By the way, I always say I'm not an engineer. I should just come clean right now. I like to play one and pretend to be one, so just let me have that while I'm here. Comes to me, it tells me what's broken, I fix it, we're good. That feedback loop. An example, again, probably something you all have experience with. This is not rocket science, but these are some pretty decent fundamentals that are in play in DevOps today. And finally, the continual learning, also critical. The third way, I've got ops, I got dev people here. Do you think that they had to ever get together and talk to each other? How do I know as a developer what I should even be putting in my infrastructure as code to make things work? Classic thing we always talked about at the very beginning of the days of DevOps, yes, I'm old, is, it works on my machine, right? Everyone hears that all the time. Well, I built something, I tested it, it works on my machine because I have a certain JDK, I have a certain operating system, I hand it over to operations, and they're like, this isn't working, I wasn't expecting this, and it goes back, and then it just goes back and forth, or it just sits there. Code doesn't matter until it's delivered into the hands of the end user. So you got to work together, you have to communicate. We've come a long way with that. I mean, I remember literally as a product person sitting in a room with a DBA, a sysadmin, and then the head of development, and they were refusing to speak to each other, and I was just crying. So we've all sort of understand the tensions there between those people. We have to work to get over those. So keep that in the back of your mind, that it works on my computer, because I always like to think of that as a nice fancy definition for DevOps too, where it's like we solve the it works on my computer problem. And it works on all computers. That's sort of an easy way to explain it. So nice review too at the bottom. We're talking about everything is code. I think we're going to hear about that a little bit throughout this conference. And I got the application code. Now I have my infrastructure code. Those can move down the pipeline together. They're paired, they're coupled, so I know when it goes to deploy, I can roll it back, I can roll it forward, et cetera, et cetera. But they're a nice happy couple. All right? Quick, nice little review, stepping back. DevOps, kind of where we are today, the three ways. Now let's ruin the party. And I'm going to bring in my friends, the databases. When I started in tech on data, like that was my jam. Was doing old school CRM systems, relational databases. They're very comforting. They're very nicely structured. They bring happiness to me. So when I was working on them, and then I went into DevOps, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I don't need to deal with data for a while because data's hard. I'll deal with this for a while. This is a little bit easier because you break something, you don't have to buy it, you can just redo it. And then when I came into this land of data and DevOps together, the first thing I was like, well, what is it? Why can't I just apply these DevOps principles? Why can't I just do this? And some of this is probably obvious to you all, but it wasn't obvious to me, so I'm going to humble myself and put it out there. And actually shout out to Jimmy Bogart, his credit where credit is due on the slide. If you get a chance to watch his presentation from a couple years ago. Here's the deal, data is different. Databases are different, data are different. Oh my gosh, did I say data is different? Oh. The database was missing from that pipeline. I don't know if you all noticed, kind of going back to this slide, I don't see it in there. Because it's hard, we've just erased it, which is why I was like, nobody puts database in the corner. I mean, seriously, why are we even building any of this software? A lot of the software that we're building is data-driven. It is created to consume, to migrate, to morphate, to ETLate, to whatever famous word I want to put in there and make up data. All right, your company, here's the deal. Your company prefers the data to your code. It's true. If your company lost all of their data versus losing your code, which do you think would be worse, to be honest? You know, most situations, not all, there's always an exception. I get it. And this is why. Losing code is bad, but losing data is really, really, really bad because applications are ideally stateless. And this was the one where it was like, duh. Like, that's huge. Working in a stateless environment makes DevOps, I'm not going to say simple because none of this is simple, but it makes it much more possible. It allows you to tear things up and tear things down. It is much easier to mess up data, and as a result, it's much harder to resolve the problems. So it's even more important that we prevent the problems from ever happening in the beginning. So I love this quote from Jim Taggart. You won't get fired for killing an application, but you will get fired for killing a database. Now, again, there's exceptions there. You probably would get fired, but you get the point. So databases and data are different. Does that mean that we shouldn't, are they so different that we can't take all of this wonderful, fabulous stuff that we've all been doing and look at the database? No, it's not so different. There are things we can do. And we already talked a little bit about sort of the fundamentals of these three ways. I'm going to start backwards. I'm going to start with the third way, which has to do with the people and applying and learnings. First of all, when I did that little picture and I put it up there, where was that database? Where was the DBA or whatever you choose to call your data professionals? Were they in the picture? Were we even trying to understand what it is they're trying to do, what their fears are, what they're trying to prevent? Most of us know. And again, because we technically just jump ahead to, it's going to be hard. And it is. You know, how do I get a test database run up? Okay, those are hard, legitimate questions. I get you. Does that mean we don't bring the DBAs to the table to have the discussion? No. The first step, and seriously, if this is all we take, like all of us take out this door from this talk, my job is over and I can just go home and it'll be great. I can finally open the retirement community for the old dogs because that's what I want to do. Bring your DBA to the table. Understand what they're saying, understand what they're afraid of, understand what changes they're afraid of losing. Because what we talked about earlier, data is such high risk that what we tend to face is that the people who are in charge of it, and you've probably seen this a little bit with security as well, they just latch down on it. You know, it's the QA behavior, it's the DBA behaviors. It's completely justified. I'm not making fun of it because I don't think people should do it. It makes sense. What's the first thing a lot of us do as humans when we're faced with a lot of change and something that I'm responsible for is going to go, someone else is going to take charge of something I'm responsible for and they're going to make a computer do it instead of me? Oh, hell no. I'm going to go down. Everything has to go through me as a human. So try to understand instead of just saying, my DBA is not friendly, they're not da-da-da. Really sit down and listen, what are they actually afraid of? What are they actually, because what they're going to tell you is legit and scary, and you can probably help, but the first thing you can do is just listen, which I realize is sort of an easy thing to say and a really hard thing to do. All right, so bring them to the table. Now, let's look at, I'm going to go back to the first way. We talked about earlier, and it was really great to see everybody's hands go up, that version control is a pretty standard thing. We're all used to keeping our application code in, whatever version control tool of choice you have. Many of us, that's, GitHub. I tend to just say that. I'm not representing any companies here, so if I just say GitHub, it's an accident. So I am representing Liquidbase. I am representing that company, just to be clear, but I'm not representing GitHub. So we're used to that. And now many of us have started to also manage our application code as code. And you have version control, and you can collaborate, and you can fork, and you can branch, and you can merge, and you can do automated testing. And this is all awesome. So why not bring the database changes as code in there right along with you? So company I work for, Liquidbase, we have a couple different tools, and one of them in particular, one of our fundamentals is a changelog. And what that allows you as an application developer to do is to not have to learn SQL, and not have to learn all the specifics of each type of, is it Postgres, is it H2, is it MySQL, is it da-da-da, to make pretty standard changes that will go along with your application code. So if you're writing your application and you're like, oh my goodness, I need to insert a new column, do you push your code all the way through, all the way to the change, and then wait for that DBA to manually review it and then add the column in production? Probably, you might, and that is okay. That's the other thing I want to say, not here to judge at all. I'm a good talker. I don't execute this stuff on my own, so I'm not judging. Just saying, like, okay, given what we know about DevOps, shouldn't we also be maybe taking this data schema code and data, all the trigger code and all that stuff and managing it as code and giving everybody who's working on this the ability to collaborate on it, to version on it, to test on it, which I just skipped ahead because I'm skipping to the second. I skip ahead too. To go test on it, and then when you get the test, be notified as a developer that something's broken and something's wrong, and that you get to fix it before it ever even applies it to the database. Even if it's trying to apply it to a QA database, let's at least look at, are there some rules that we can enforce right up front, just like you would with application code, or just like you would with infrastructure code. So kind of going to the second way then, when we're talking about the fast feedback loops, this is the situation I just talked about here, where you as a developer, you might add something to the database or propose an addition, it goes, the DBA or whoever's in charge gets to review it after you've already done all of your DevOps-y things, and it's all packaged and ready to go, and then the DBA looks at it and goes, no, that's broken. And then the DBA fixes it maybe tells you, maybe they tell you and say you to go fix it. You don't really know how to fix it. Or what happens, we've heard a lot too, is that the DBA will just fix it and move on because it's too much work to explain all the complications of my land, my world. What does this sound like? DevOps, when dev had to learn what ops does and vice versa. It's like, it's too complicated. I could never teach an engineer how to do this. I'm a DBA. It's the same sort of thing where it's like, can we come together? I go back to that room with the 3 people and me crying. Can't we all just get along? So instead, what's a better option? I am gonna go and do a little plug for a liquid-based tool. It's the one I know. We have something called quality checks, and what this allows you to do, and you can do it on its own, or you can integrate it with your CI/CD orchestrator of choice very easily. That DBA, let's say that the DBA never wants to let any developer, drop a column. It might be a good thing. I don't want you to be able to ever drop a column. We'll start there. Or change privileges and rights. You should never be able to do that. Fine. You put the quality check in place. This sounds pretty familiar. You run it through your tests. You run it through your pipeline. And just like with anything else that you're using some kind of threshold on testing for, you can have a warning and let it go through, or you can trigger it to stop your pipeline. Tell the developer, go fix it. So there we go, nice little developers being able to write in a language that is more native to them. And we have I'm gonna get this wrong. Don't record this. YAML, JSON, XML, we do have SQL. So it's like, you don't have to go learn all of this stuff. Put that in my code, I get told it's wrong. Oh, I was trying to drop a column. Yeah, that's bad. Whoops. Instead of too far down the line, or instead of my code being held up at the next brick wall down the tunnel. So with that, I think I might have actually done this in a decent amount of time. Yes. Woo. Where do we go from here? These are the top 3 I'd like you to take away with you. The first one, which I said earlier, is probably the most important ever, and that's just invite your DBA. How many people are database administrators in this room? Professionally, right now, full-time? Look around for a second. I just got the chills, which was like, wow, we have a great opportunity to make some real friggin' change. That made me very excited. All right. Invite your DBAs to the table. You may not solve it, but at least we're all going to understand it a little bit better. Start managing your databases as code along with your application code, even if you're not automating it, even if all you're doing is putting your SQL scripts into your version control, even if you're not pairing it along in the pipeline and doing the testing with your application code and your infrastructure code. Start the concept of version control. It's too bad we don't have DBAs in the room because we all take version control for granted in here. DBAs, the whole idea of Git flow for them right now is a new concept. If that's, again, all we can teach, great. That's going to give us huge headway. And then also investigate building automated quality and policy checks on database code into your CI/CD pipelines. So with that, I do have, I assume the conference will have the slides available to people. Great, I'm getting nods, excellent. So I did put some links in here. Liquid-based University, we have a bunch of free classes, and yes, they are about the liquid-based product specifically, but they also teach some good practices and good ideas. This one in particular is about the CI/CD process. Validate your database code with quality checks if you were interested in that, which was that third thing I talked about checking your code for things like preventing developers from dropping tables and dropping columns. That's a good link. If you haven't read this ebook about DevOps for the database, it came out about 2 years ago, and it's pretty spot on. I did put a little asterisk, just it kind of, I'm not busting on any SolarWinds people because we all know SolarWinds is a very large company working on a lot of stuff, but I did want to just put a caveat there. It's going to say SolarWinds on it. This individual and his company had nothing to do with what you heard about in the recent past. So don't judge a book by its sponsor. And finally, this book, it's actually in the same, Maddie put up the CI/CD book or the continuous delivery book, same series. This is Refactoring Databases, Evolutionary Database Design. It when it came out, it didn't feel like necessarily it was part of our world. It is 100% part of our world. And that's it. Look at me, 25 minutes, right on the dot. That's like what I'm most proud of the talk, is that I went on time. I guess we have some time for questions?
Yeah, if you want to take a...
I can take a couple. I'll try my best. I'm also, like I said, going to be around. Going once. Going twice. Hi, Hope. Oh, wait, I forgot. Shout out to all the DevOps divas in the room, because what up? There's like 10 of us. That's a problem, my people. Yes, ma'am. Because they're scared of us. No. Well, I think it was interesting. It's a good question. Gosh, what's a good way to say this? When I first, because I used to actually work with Hope and work in a more scaled Jenkins kind of environment on like DevOps stuff. And a lot of what I would do, I would meet with people who were scaling DevOps, and I'd ask them, well, when you get to the testing, what are you doing with the database? And there would be some really crazy advanced companies, and they're like, oh, we don't talk about the database. And you're like, oh my God. And so I think part of it is because there's still such a, when I look at the history of DevOps and you look at, oh, this is interesting. Now I'm on a tangent. Patrick Debois, I never know how to say his name, Debois. I don't know which one it is. Is it Debois? Okay, so it's not, it's W-E-B Du Bois and Patrick Debois. Got it. The use case that caused him to first think about DevOps, when you go look at the history, was a data center migration. And what he found, is he went to the application developer people, and they were like, oh, I'm all agile. And then he goes to the sysops, the netops people, and they're like total waterfalls, understandably, because it's a planned, high-risk environment. I think when you start to de-risk things, it allows for more trust in automation and more trust in DevOps, and there is still such a high risk of data, and there should be, but what we haven't yet taught that we were able to, when we crossed the chasm a little bit with Dev and Ops, we were able to give operations people the confidence that automating would allow them to actually do better work, more work, and do substantive work, and not threaten their job, and actually allow them to have higher control. We haven't demonstrated that to data yet. We need to build trust with them, us and them. We all need to build trust on this, that automation is actually better than one single human looking at it, because that doesn't scale, and it actually has more error. Am I at time now?
Yeah, you're fine.
I think, okay. All right. Good question. Anybody else? Okay, cool. Thank you so much. That was fun.